The invitation that the National Cathedral extended to Max Lucado created a controversy.
But the cathedral did well to allow opposing viewpoints.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz. It's so good to have you with us. We have an interesting topic this morning about an event that occurred, and we'll be unfolding that with our panelists. So we want you to meet our panelists first.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest in Washington, D.C., and have served on the staff at the Washington National Cathedral.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
And I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister at First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
And I'm Mel ROBECK. I'm an Assemblies of God minister who serves at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, as senior professor of church history and ecumenics and as special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're looking forward to this discussion. Recently, the Washington National Cathedral, an Episcopal church, invited an evangelical minister, Max Lucado, to preach a sermon on Sunday morning. The sermon addressed how God helps us through our trials. When members of the LGBTQ+ community heard that Lucado had been invited to preach at the cathedral, they began a petition to have the invitation rescinded. The reason was that he had spoken out against homosexual activity in some 16 years previously. Time clearly does not heal wounds, nor do people forgive easily. Fortunately, the cathedral did not rescind the invitation, though the dean did take the opportunity to distance himself from a 2004 statement made by Max Lucado. The sermon Lucado preached at the cathedral was uplifting and non-controversial. Given this distressing moment for all parties concerned, we'd like to ask our panel to consider the following questions. 1, was cathedral leadership wrong to invite and then allow Max Lucado to preach at the cathedral given the petition drive? 2, should Max Lucado now invite an LGBTQ+ minister to the Episcopal Church to preach, from the Episcopal Church to preach in his congregation? And 3, what role should any group play, not in church leadership, determining who occupies the pulpit or what is said from the pulpit? We have a statement now from one of the staff emeritus of the cathedral, and that is our panelist, Canon John.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank you, Mr. Moderator, for giving me this opportunity to make a statement in relationship to what unfolded that Sunday morning. Before my colleagues discuss this program today, I would like to give some historical background to what unfolded on Sunday, February 7, 2021, when the Reverend Max Lucado preached at the National Cathedral at the invitation of the Cathedral Dean, Dean Randy Hollworth. The National Cathedral was built to be a cathedral for the nation. The National Cathedral sees itself and practices to be a house of prayer for all people. While the cathedral is the cathedral of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, the cathedral strives to serve God and our neighbors as agents of reconciliation, a trusted voice of moral leadership, and a sacred space where the country gathers during moments of national significance. Dean Randy Hollworth invited Max Lucado to preach at the National Cathedral because he believed Lucado to be a man of deep faith, quote unquote. The dean also hoped the Locado's presence would be a step towards building new bridges with the evangelical community. Well, Dean Randy did not know what was that Locado in 2004 had written and said some horrific things about the LGBTQ people. When this invitation was found out by the LGBTQ community and their friends, there was enormous consternation. In a letter to the cathedral congregation after his sermon, Locado reflected on the sermon he preached in 2004 on same-sex marriage. Locado said, and I quote directly from his letter, "I can see that in that sermon I was disrespectful, I was hurtful, I wounded people in ways that they were devastated. I should have done better. It grieves me that my words have hurt or been used to hurt the LGBT community. I apologize to you and I ask forgiveness of Christ." So now the cathedral moves forward, committed to building bridges that need to be built, and that is never an easy or uncomplicated path. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you. I appreciate Canon Peterson laying out the difficult episode in the life, this difficult episode in the life of the cathedral, because it mirrors so much of what our faith communities generally try to do. We disciples hold ourselves out there. I'm not sure we're unique in it, but if we have any uniqueness, it is in our understanding of the breadth of the table of the Lord, to which all are invited. And I regularly say, as long as you believe Jesus is Christ, come on in, and we'll work out the differences. But actually doing that is a very difficult thing to do. And I wouldn't claim that we are the only ones that try to do that by any stretch. I think of an effort that we made before the pandemic. We spent a couple of autumns, a couple of fall periods, arranging conferences on controversial issues. One on the Me Too movement, and on the treatment of women, and one on immigration. And we sought to create an environment in which we call them community conversations, and we invited the community in to share their understandings, to be a part of hearing opposing viewpoints, and but looking back on what we did, we realized that, our inherent biases came out, and in planning the programming, we basically presented one side both times, because it's terribly difficult. I was interviewed by a congregation many years ago that prided itself on its liberalism, and they asked me in the interview what I thought the ways forward, or the things that the church might need to, the challenges the church might need to face. And here I was just being interviewed. I didn't know all that much about the congregation, and I said, well, basically, y'all know more about what your challenges are than I do. But I would bet that one of the challenges is appealing to people who don't swing left, who are not in the same place politically and theologically that the bulk of this congregation is. And that is the challenge that all of our faith communities face, both on the local level, the individual church or synagogue or mosque level, and on the larger level as well. It is very difficult to create a safe space where everyone feels like they are heard. You invite, if you're a congregation like the cathedral that sees itself kind of over here as open to everyone, so you invite an evangelical who may not be in that in that position, and so then you get flack from folks saying, well, you shouldn't have invited him because he said hurtful words. Yeah, he did, and all that needed to be apologized for. But the conversation is the place where we learn and grow and change.
Thanks, Tom. Jan?
So I think there's an old adage that says, what is the purpose of religion? It's to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. And I think we sometimes have to ask ourselves, what is it that we want when we go to a house of worship? On the one hand, there are some that would say, I've come because it's a safe place for me to be affirmed for who I am. And at the same time, I think too often it's a place where we come to affirm what we already know and to have ourselves get patted on the back for believing what we already believe. And I think that there is a difficult balance that a house of worship has to create between creating a sanctuary, which is a safe space, and at the same time trying to find a place where you can be pushed to grow. And as my personal trainer always tells me, it's the uncomfortable places where the growth occurs, not when you're comfortable. When a congregation invites somebody who has expressed repugnant views to speak from their pulpit, there is a tacit endorsement of that individual and, by extension, a potential endorsement of those hurtful things that were said before. And I think that houses of worship and those who invite people to speak from the pulpit, I would say the only person who ought to have a right to determine who speaks from the pulpit is the person who inhabits that pulpit, not a lay board or not a committee. But that there needs to be a sensitivity to that real reality, that you can create an unsafe space for people by bringing in somebody, honoring them with a place and honor when they've expressed repugnant beliefs. At the same time, I'm going to paraphrase Yitzhak Rabin, who said, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. And so in order to build the bridges, which I think was the goal of the cathedral, you're going to have to deal with people who don't believe what you believe and who may express things. And as long as you let people know in advance, yes, we're inviting this person who doesn't believe the same way we do in a whole bunch, but let's see what we do have to learn from that individual. And maybe realize that there's more that unites us than divides us, and then we can deal with those things that divide us. It's a very difficult tightrope to walk.
Thank you, Dan. Mel?
Yeah, I feel handicapped in a sense because I've never been a pastor, at least not on a full-time basis. I've certainly done my share of preaching and and have served with pastors on staffs and so forth, but I've never been a lead pastor or a senior pastor in any sense. But I have watched, and as an ecumenist, I have had contact with hundreds and hundreds of pastors all over the world. And they all share similar kinds of issues and problems, maybe not specific to this, but specifically, who controls the pulpit. And I'm absolutely adamant that it must be the person who inhabits that pulpit. I'm absolutely sure. Who determines what is going to be preached and what is not going to be preached? I think it's the same person. Okay? But I also recognize that that person is part of a larger community, not simply the local congregation although it could be, say, in a Baptist setting or even in my own Assembly of God. But the reality is I am held accountable to a certain set of principles, fundamentals of faith, and so forth. And if I violate those, then I'm in trouble. And rightfully so, because I've agreed to be part of a community that will hold me accountable to those kinds of things and so forth. But the reality is here in this situation, I felt for Max Lucado. I don't know him at all. I've never heard him speak. I've never read any of his books, and he has a lot of them. But my sense was that he was invited to speak on how God might meet us in a challenge like the pandemic in which he was speaking. That's what he did. That's what he did. But the people that didn't want him because he was a symbol of something else, something that goes back 16 years in his particular instance. I find that difficult to accept. I find that very difficult to accept, largely because I think that person has had the opportunity to grow over that 16 years, and if I take that apology seriously, which I think it was given that way, then I think that he has in fact grown from where he was to where he is. Okay? I do, however, take my hat off to the Dean of the Cathedral in not backing down under that kind of pressure. There are lots of boards and there are lots of people that say, you will speak on this and this is the way you're going to do it and so forth. No, you're accountable to bring these people to God and to represent these people before God and to represent God before these people, and you'd better be the one who's going to make that decision, not anybody else. So I think it's really important that the dean stood by his person, although he did read a response. Did he not? He put out a letter, I think,
He put out a letter,
Yeah,
yes.
he put out a letter. And I think it was a very good letter as a result, and trying to kind of settle the dispute or the concerns that people had. I wish in my own churches that we had more of this cross-fertilization than what we get. We tend to be, quote, apolitical, which means we never talk about anything important. Never. Never. We talk about evangelism, we talk about revival. You know, I never hear anything. I push my pastors and I push my denominational leaders to put things on the agenda. They never do it. They never do it. Because they're afraid of what people are going to say, and they're afraid of the potential of splitting the denomination or the church if they take a particular position or speak to something that's really essential in today's society.
Dan?
It's very difficult.
In the Talmud, there's two schools of thought that bitterly contested each other, Hillel and Shammai.
Yeah.
And there's a famous passage in the Talmud when they're debating a particular idea where it says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These words and those words are the words of the living God, but the law goes according to Hillel. Well, how come Hillel, if they're both the words of the living God? And they say because Hillel taught that you should teach the lessons of Shammai in addition to the lessons of Hillel, and that they should teach Shammai's lessons before they teach their own lessons. That the reason why they say Hillel had that modesty is that Hillel said, hey, I don't necessarily have a monopoly on the truth. And why I commend the cathedral for going outside the boundaries of what would make them comfortable is because they've said, even from somebody who is in the evangelical world and we're in the non-evangelical world, we have a lot to learn from that individual. And figuring out how we can create enough steeliness within ourselves to say, yes, maybe that person doesn't believe as I believe. Maybe that person may have said some reprehensible things in the past, still can learn from that individual. With at the same time trying to figure out how not to read it as a pure endorsement of everything that individual said. I think too often we cancel out a lot of wisdom we might learn because we refuse to have that steeliness and that resilience.
These are hard questions. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I would just challenge us all to think. I'm not sure, Mel, that I agree with you totally. I could imagine having a person who had repeatedly said that if you aren't a Christian, you're going to hell. And by the way, Tom Plumbley, for even appearing on the same television panel with Dan Levin, you're in trouble because this guy is going to hell because he doesn't believe that Jesus is the Christ. And if I let that person come to my pulpit and just to say something nice about some different subject, it's very difficult to separate him or her from all the other nastiness that that person has said about the Jewish community.
Thanks, Tom. Let's go to a break and we'll be right back.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and we're so glad that we have a sponsor in the Town Hall organization, and we are also glad to hear from you. So please feel free to write, and this is an important subject on a very recent event, and we'd like to have John to tell us his summation.
Yes, I want to thank the American Religious Town Hall for this program. I think it's important to be able to know it certainly was a controversy which was just not within the National Cathedral, but globally, and not globally, but nationally, and for the panelists today for their sensitivity in responding to this. It seems to me that one of the promises made is that the National Cathedral, when things cool down a little bit, will continue to have this discussion. And but of course, as I said, it's not an easy or uncomplicated path to be able to do that, and the cathedral, in its wisdom, will find a time. I also want to say that I found the letter that Max Lucado sent to the congregation of the cathedral. It was a letter that went to all the members of the cathedral. I thought his apology was incredible, and his sensitivity for how he hurt people, how he had wounded people, and I think that shows certainly a tremendous compassion and empathy that he displayed. So between what happened that Sunday, hopefully new bridges will be able to be built so that there will be more conversations, more discussions that will be able to take place between the evangelical community and the National Cathedral.
Thank you. Tom?
And between the National Cathedral and the LGBTQ community that was personally so offended. Yes. Religious communities should always be places for free and lively exchange of ideas. And they should be that even when it hurts. The problem is that we can say, come let us reason together all day long, but when it gets right down to it, we have to be led by an ethic of love that in many cases we're not able to get to because of our previous biases, some well-founded, some not so well-founded.
Thank you. Mel?
Yes, excuse me. I think pastors are supposed to be the leaders of a congregation. They bring people to God, and they bring God to the people, in a sense. The liturgical practices of the church, which include prayer and singing and Bible reading and so forth, are all intended to develop those people as people of faith, as a community of faith in their walk with God. But it's also the case that churches are supposed to be, and religious institutions by far, are supposed to be teaching places as well. And I think that some churches and some groups do better, far better on teaching than others do. I think every class, in a sense, should have an edge to it. It's not there simply to pat us on the back and tell us, oh, you're doing a great job. We need to be challenged. 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 And we need to work at deciding where those challenges can be best met. I don't think we'd always do such a great job. But if we're not leading both in worship and in teaching, then I think we have missed what we're supposed to be doing.
Thanks, Mel. Dan?
I think there's a difficult balance that has to be made between helping houses of worship and other places be safe spaces for those who are historically marginalized people, who are already a little nervous about, am I going to be safe here? Am I going to be accepted here? Am I going to be okay in this space? Is this a place where I'm going to be raised up? And I think we have to have special sensitivities to those folks. At the same time, how does transformation take place? How did Max Lucado transform from what he said 16 years ago to the man that he is today? And I will bet you, I don't know him, but I would bet it's because of the exposure he has had to the other that he didn't know before. And the way that we experience transformation is when we are able to have that sense of exposure to the other. And that requires courage. And that requires openness. It requires resilience. And figuring out how you create enough safety to inspire that kind of openness and resilience, I think, is the special sauce that we're trying to figure out how to make.
Thank you, Dan. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you. Thy